driving around in this heat. You like, I don't know if you guys, those of you who have glasses, have the same problems I do. You get out of your air conditioning car and immediately your glasses fog up and you're like, oh great.
Yeah.
And then like right now I have my shirt tucked in, so I can't like just grab my shirt and clean them off. I'm like, what do I do? You have to stand, you just wait for the heat to like, to regulate itself around your glasses, and so it's kind of interesting. But yeah, no, I'm super excited to be here. I was up in Corpus yesterday with some other authors at the same thing, like Barnes Noble all across the nation are doing this, which is really fantastic. It's a great thing for young people. And I want to talk to you about my young adult fantasy series called Garza Twins. Now, I don't know if any of you guys are fans of things like Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series or Harry Potter or those kinds of books. But I have 3 kids. 2 of them are in college now and one's in high school. But when we were younger, we would read books together. We would read these series of books. And we always loved to read like science fiction and fantasy series. It was our favorite thing to do. And we would read them and talk about them and make jokes and have our favorite characters and argue with each other about who was better. Now, I come from the Rio Grande Valley. My parents both graduated from McAllen High School. And my family is, like a lot of families in the valley, kind of like a mixed ethnicity. On my father's side of the family, they're Mexican American. My mom's side of the family is Anglo. And so I grew up the years that I was in the valley, because my dad was in the Navy and I got to live outside the valley for several years, and that was kind of fun. I got to grow up in this kind of mixed background. And so, you know, my wife is from Mexico, my kids are Mexican American. So when we're reading this, one of the things we always noticed was if there were Mexican American characters, they were always like the sidekick, right? Like, you know, the Latino friend that the Anglo kids have as they're going to fight the Greek and Roman gods or the European monsters and so forth. And what we wanted to do was one day to open one of these books and have like a Mexican American girl, like a Chicana, and she's like facing off against, I don't know, like Aztec and Mayan gods or like Lechuzas or La Llorona or something like that. We wanted to see, you know, ourselves in it. And it seemed a little silly to us at first, and we would make jokes about it, like, yeah, that's going to ever happen. But the more we talked about it, the more it struck me that that was a really, really cool idea. That why don't we have that kind of literature for young people who are growing up in our culture? And what's more, there weren't a lot of characters in these books that are from the Rio Grande Valley. And I've lived here almost all my life, and I think there's wonderful stories to be told about it. So I got the idea, okay, let me do it. Let me go ahead and write a series. First it was just one book, but it grew into a series as I began thinking about it. That will be fantasy in the same way that these books that I love are, but it will deal with the things that I grew up loving and that I've been studying. You know, I'm a big fan of Mexican like culture, pre-Columbian culture, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Tarumadas, and all these different cultures. And I've studied like the Nahuatl language, the language of the Aztecs, translated poetry from it and so forth. So it just seemed like a perfect fit for me, because I love young adult stuff and I love you know, studying the roots of my father's side of the family. And so it just kind of came together. But here's the trick. So I knew I wanted to write a book that was going to have Mexican American characters, and they were going to meet up against Aztec and Mayan gods. But what characters and where would they go? How many of you guys are playing video games? Like playing video games? Well, yeah, totally gamer, huh? I can see it. You have the gamer look in your eyes. And one of the cool things about video games is the levels, right? You have to learn the level well, and you defeat the boss for that level, and then you move up to the next level, and you defeat that boss. And that's a structure that a lot of games have, and eventually you get up to the big boss that you have to defeat. And I thought, there is a perfect analog to this in Aztec culture. It's their underworld. Underworld has 9 layers, and according to them, when somebody would die, they would have to go through the 9 layers. In each layer, there were like obstacles they had to pass. There were demons or crazy gods that you had to get by in order for your soul to be purified, so that you could reach the bottom and then face the big boss, which were the Lord and Lady of the underworld, Lord and Lady Death. And so I knew that that was what I wanted to, the world I wanted to put my Mexican American characters in. But I still didn't know what the heroes were going to be like. And you know, like I said, I had read a lot of things like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, so I knew like the basic idea of those kinds of heroes, but I wanted to come up with something different. So I was driving back from picking up my son and daughter from school, my son and daughter, because I have 2 daughters and 1 son. My oldest daughter lives in Austin right now, but the other 2, Charlene and Angelo, even though they're 4 years apart, it's very unusual. They're best friends, which is kind of odd. First of all, for siblings who are that far apart to be best friends, and then if they're boy and girl, it's just unusual. Not unheard of, but unusual. And as we were driving back home, they were like showing each other things on their video gaming consoles. I can't remember what they were using at the time. It's been so many years now. And making jokes and poking fun at each other, but in a loving kind of way. Like, they got along really well. They were on the same wavelength. And I knew in that moment, these 2 guys need to be the template for my protagonist. This is something that authors do all the time. I don't know if anybody here is interested in writing, but one of the ways to create characters is to take people from your own life, and don't just write them in your book, because that's not cool. You definitely have to change the names at the very least, okay? But use them as a template, as the basis for building your characters. So I took my son and my daughter and their friendship and so forth, and I said, what if they were 4 years apart? I said, what if I subtracted 2 years on either end and made them the same age and made them twins, fraternal twins, because they're a boy and girl? That would be a cool idea. So now the problem was, why did they go to the underworld? I got my characters. I need to know why they go to the underworld. You don't just wake up one day and say, oh, let me go to the land of the dead. That sounds like a good idea. You're right, exactly. I've got nothing better to do. It's summer, I'm bored, I'm going to the land of the dead. And I thought, what would drive kids from my culture to take extreme actions? I thought to myself, what would get me upset? Would be like if one of my loved ones were in danger. So I thought to myself, what if these kids' mother was in danger? And I know sometimes we might have problems with our moms, we fight with them, nos tratan mal, they treat us kind of bad sometimes, right? But we love them, and if somebody messes with them, we'll get all like really mad right away. And so I knew that was going to be the dilemma. Their mom is missing, and so they have to go and rescue her. And then, bit by bit, they're going to discover that she's in the underworld. But then the question was, why would she be in the underworld, right? And how could they go into the underworld and fight off against these gods? So that was kind of floating in the back of my mind. I didn't know what to do. And one more, I get up really early in the morning to write. I get up about 5:15, and have a cup of coffee and sit down at my computer and write, because everybody's asleep. In my family, nobody gets up before I wake them up, because they don't apparently have alarm clocks or anything like that. I am their alarm clock. And I write for about an hour and a half. I'm very disciplined about it. That's one of the ways that I've been able to produce so much. And this one morning, I got my coffee, and it was kind of nice outside, and so I said, let me go stand outside and just finish my coffee out in the back porch. And I walk out in the back porch, and do you guys have cats? Anybody have a cat? You know this thing that cats do where they think they're bringing you a prize, right? It's like rewarding you for the food you bring them. They bring you like a rat or a bird or something like that, and you're like, gee, thank you, now I've got to dispose of this animal. And they get mad too. You're exposing it, and they're looking at you like, why are you not eating it? I don't understand. Well, lying there right on the edge of my porch was a huge jackrabbit. The thing was as big as my cat. First of all, I thought to myself, how did he kill this thing? Because it was very dead. It was there. And so as I was kind of moaning and groaning and looking for the shovel, I suddenly got this vision in my head of my daughter Charlene laying in the grass with the jackrabbit in her hands. And as a writer, when your brain gives you a vision like that, you sit out and you notice, because your brain's been doing the work on an unconscious level, trying to figure out your problem for you. And so I thought to myself, okay, why would she have a jackrabbit in her hands? And I realized it would be because she killed it. And why would she kill it? And why would she be asleep afterwards? And the thing immediately came to me, because she's a nagual. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard the word nagual, but when I was growing up, I would go to my Uncle Joe Casas' ranch in Mission, and he would tell us stories of these men who could shapeshift into coyotes and lobos and wolves and stuff like that, and they would come and like steal, goats and kill cows and stuff like that. And he used to freak us out about that. Some of my neighbors might be shapeshifters, so be careful. And in that moment, I realized the twins are shapeshifters. And that was when the whole story clicked into place. It made perfect sense to me now. Their mom's been missing for 6 months at the beginning of the first book, The Smoking Mirror. And as a result, their family's kind of going through a really, really bad spot. Because she just took off one day to go down to the corner store and bring milk. And she's a really active woman, so she wanted to walk down to the store. But she never returned. She didn't take anything with her, and like none of her makeup, none of her clothes, none of her shoes. She just got a closet full of shoes. And so the twins are convinced that something bad's happened to her. Their dad, however, is kind of going nuts because he thinks that his wife has left him. He doesn't know what's going on, right? And the twins are going through some weird things as a result. They start having these really horrible dreams. And the weirdest thing is when Carol wakes up in the very beginning of the book with the dead jackrabbit in her hands. And this kind of sets off this whole journey. And bit by bit, they discover the truth. Because their dad, in order to get some counseling that he needs, for that summer, he ships them off to Mexico to be with their Aunt Veronica in Monterrey. I don't know if you guys have ever spent a summer in Mexico. That it's very different. Like if you're living in the United States and suddenly you're spending the summer in Mexico, a very different vibe. And they go over there and they find their mom's journal and they discover that she's a shapeshifter and they've inherited her abilities. But see, the key to this is because they're twins, and twin shapeshifters only come along every 1,000 years, they have additional abilities as well that are called savage magic. And it's the savage magic that's going to allow them in the 5 books of the series to confront some really, really difficult things. So the first thing they learn about savage magic is that not only can they shapeshift into their normal forms, which for, and I by the way, I should introduce you to them. So this is, you'll see Johnny, and his name is Juan Angel, but everybody calls him Johnny, and his sister Carolina or Carol, and their last name is Garza, like most of the people on my dad's side of the family. And so I just like totally stole it. Here's a clue to their name. So my son's name is Angelo Giovanni, and Angelo is Angel, right? And Giovanni is Juan, and then I switched it around as Juan Angel. He didn't think that was very amusing. And then my daughter's name is Charlene, which is the feminine form of Charles, and Carolina is the feminine form of Carlos, and so whatever. So there you go. They're the templates. And they read the book and they're like, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't do that. And I go, well, because they're not you. I'm just using your personality as a starting point. Johnny, when he turns into his normal Nahual form, is a jaguar. And Carol is a wolf, a northern Mexican wolf. That's their normal form. But because they're twin shapeshifters, anytime they hold a bit of animal DNA, they can transform into that animal, which is really convenient. You know, go down to South Padre Island. You're like, I want to go swimming, but the water's kind of rough. Oh, I've got a shark's tooth, so let me transform into a shark. You know, I really, really wish I had this ability. So there's a lot of wish fulfillment in this book. Like, it was really fantastic to do this kind of stuff. So they need these abilities because they learn that their mom has been kidnapped by the Aztec god Tezcatlipoca. Now, one of the things that's hard about writing about Aztec and Mayan, well, especially Aztec gods, Mayan gods into that, is that we know the names of the Greek gods, Zeus and Aphrodite and Apollo, and they're all easy to say. And then you like look at the Aztec names and you're like, what? How am I supposed to pronounce that? So I've luckily included a pronunciation guide in the back. So again, but Tezcatlipoca's name is literally the smoking mirror. That's what it means. And he's the god of chaos. He's not evil in the sense of like Satan versus God and the Christian religion. He's like the flip side of creation. His brother, Quetzalcoatl, or Quetzalcoatl as we all say, is the god of creation, and he's the god of chaos. And they're always at odds with each other. And the world usually is hanging in the balance as they're like duking it out. So he's kidnapped their mom, and has her at the lowest level of the Aztec underworld, McAllen. And so they've got to use their powers to go in, and they have help from different people and different supernatural beings and so forth, and they make their way through in order to try to rescue their mom. Now, to me, what was really important as I was writing this book was not to have a hero who's like a loner. Because we get lots of those. He's the loner, he's the chosen one, his family doesn't understand, he's got to like fight against all the odds and just based on his own knowledge and courage and so forth win the day. I wanted them to depend on each other and on their family. And so it's really the love that they have for each other, their friendship and their family connection that in the end, because they're facing off against a god who's been around, you know, since the beginning of the earth or whatever. It's not something that they're going to be, it's not someone they can defeat, you know, not like just a regular demon or monster. And the only way they can get past him or to kind of mess his plans up is to use their love for their mother and for each other in addition to their powers. Now, so this first book came out last year, and it was well received, and people have been liking it. And I came here about a year ago and talked about it. And then in January of this year, I got this phone call from the American Library Association. This is one of those phone calls that, like, if you're not ready for it, it can give you a heart attack, all right? So I was eating with my wife, and it was a Sunday afternoon, a Sunday like this, but it was in January, so it was better weather. And my phone kept buzzing, and it was a phone call from Boston. I was like, who do I know in Boston? And the adults in the room will know right away. The first thing I thought was, it's either a bill collector or somebody trying to sell me something, and I don't want to talk to anybody who's trying to sell me something, and I certainly don't want to pay any bills right now. But then I got a text message from my editor who said, answer your phone now. It's the Pura del Pre Committee, and they're trying to get a hold of you. So every year, the American Library Association gives out awards to the best books in different categories. And they have different committees, right? Caldecott and so forth. And there's this one award called the Pura del Pre Award. And it's for the best Latino books written for young people, for children and young adults. And my book had been chosen as one of the top 3 books written in 2015 in that category. And so, wow, they called me up and they had me on speakerphone. They're all congratulations. And I was like, I was all shaking. And, you get really nervous about something like that. And I'm, no, gracias, mil gracias. And you get super excited about it. So it's a nice thing to have happen, especially since just this April, the second book in the series came out. Now, like I said, it's going to be a 5-book series, and a book's going to come out every year. The second book, and I'm going to read a little bit from this, some places that won't be too spoilery, sees the twins on vacation with their parents in Mexico, in Colima, enjoying the beaches while their dad, who is an anthropologist and professor at UT-RGV, is involved in archaeological dig and so forth, and they're just kicking back and thinking about how they're going to be able to use their powers to swim like manta rays and sharks and so forth. When once again they get pulled into an adventure. They find out that there is an underwater kingdom off the coast of Mexico called Tepachco, and it's built into the base of an island. It's a volcanic island. And a prince from this kingdom has gone rogue and is looking for a device called the Shadow Stone. And it's an ancient device of really dark magic, and he can use it to flood the world. And so clearly, they got to stop him, or human civilization is, at an end. So what I want to do is I'm going to read to you a little bit. I'm going to read part of the first chapter so that you can get a feel for, because the chapters alternate between Johnny and Carol's point of view. And every book starts in the Rio Grande Valley. They live in Donna. They're middle school students in the first 3 books. Yeah, because I live in Donna, so I just write about Donna because that's where I am, right? Then the book takes them to Mexico, and then takes them into whatever crazy magical world. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about them in the Rio Grande Valley, so you can get a feel for their voice and their attitude. Johnny he's kind of a hothead, but he is really anti-bullies. He's about justice, and he hates to see people getting picked on. But he goes to some ridiculous extreme sometimes that he shouldn't in order to stop bullying, and you can see that in this first chapter, okay? Pablo Limon was a recent immigrant, short and very dark-skinned, the perfect target for a loser like Cody Smith, who stood looming over the kid in the main hall of Veterans Middle School, just outside the library, on the last day of classes before Christmas break. I'm sorry, what was that, you dirty mojo? Learn freaking English, punk. You're in the U.S. now. Johnny Garza shook his head and walked up, throwing his arm around Cody as if they were best friends. Hey guys, what's up? Pablo, my cuate, ¿cómo te van las clases? Pablo looked up at the taller boys. A smile crossed his face. Bien, Johnny, I do fine. Orale pues. Why don't you head on to class, buddy? Don't want Mr. Torres getting on your case. Social studies is sacred to him. Pablo nodded, trembling with relief, and then hurried toward the 6th grade wing. What's your freaking problem, Johnny? Cody asked, trying to pull away. Johnny leaned in close to his rival. You need to stop picking on the little ones, you jerk. Feel me? And the next time you throw around racist remarks... What? You'll beat the crap out of me? Whatever. My dad's the mayor, you freak. With a smile, Johnny reached up and snatched a strand of hair from Cody's head. Ow! The other boy hissed, rubbing his skull. What the hell did you do that for? I need a strand of your hair for the curandera that I'm going to hire to cheat you, moron, if I ever hear you call someone a mojo or wetback again. Yeah, you and your crazy family, you all probably know a ton of witches and weirdos like that. No wonder your mom got kidnapped by the cartels, because that's the cover story. They can't tell people, oh, she was kidnapped by the god of chaos, right? Cartels. Just stay away from me, dude. Johnny watched Cody stomp off down the 8th grade hall. Because they're 8th graders in this book. They were 7th graders in the previous. Deep inside, beast-like ferocity squirmed, hungry to leap out and exact justice. Juan Angel Johnny Garza, like his mother and twin sister, was a Nahual, a shapeshifter capable of transforming into a jaguar. Right now, the jaguar within wanted to pounce on the stuck-up blonde jerk, give him the scare of his lifetime. But Johnny calmed his tonal, his animal soul. I've got a better idea. Johnny could use the savage magic available to him as a twin shapeshifter to assume the shape of any creature if he touched his DNA, even a human. Better known as Hot Cheetos, who had finally been promoted to high school after 5 years at Veterans Middle School. Sure enough, Signs was smoking a cigarette in the shadow of an empty portable classroom, sheltered from the light December drizzle by the rotting eaves. "Hey, loser," Johnny called in Cody's higher, more grating voice. "Nobody smokes anymore. It's pretty ghetto." Hot Cheetos snapped his head up, glaring at Johnny/Cody. "Mendigo gringo, you want me to rip your face off or something?" "Just saying, homie. Don't get all salty on me. Think about your health, Hot Cheetos." Tossing his cigarette aside, Signs balled his hands in a fist. "Way ahorita vas a ver que your health ain't all that good either." "Boys!" Rounding the corner came Ms. de Los Angeles, a special education teacher. She crossed her arms across her chest and shook her head. "Aniceto, you know I have tacos out here every morning with Miss Paz during first period. Every day. How many times do I have to bust you smoking before you learn your lesson?" "Chale, miss, I ain't smoking." He stepped on the cigarette, which had put itself out in the damp weeds already. "Sure you're not. Get on the class, sir, now." As the hood grumpily complied, the tough but kind teacher turned to Johnny/Cody. "Mr. Smith, your father may be the mayor, but that certainly doesn't give you carte blanche to skip class and get into fights with dangerous boys. What were you thinking?" "I'm sorry, Miss de Los Angeles. It won't happen again." She raised her eyebrow. "Impressive. Your Spanish pronunciation certainly has improved. Just last week you were struggling with my last name." "Oops." Because obviously Johnny can speak Spanish. "Yes, well, practice makes perfect, ma'am. Mrs. Paz is a great Spanish teacher too, but hey, I'm really great in the class right now, so I'll see you later, okay?" He turned tail and hurried back inside the building, only to bump into his sister Carol beside the gym. And so this is not good because she's like the policeman of the two of them. She likes things done by the book, and she's the smart one with a solid head. "God, Cody, watch where you're going." Without a word, Johnny kept walking, hoping she wouldn't suspect anything. "Hey, wait!" Johnny turned his head slightly. "It's you, isn't it?" Carol said in his mind, because they could communicate mind to mind since they're shape-shifting twins. Telepathy was one of the other advantages of being twin shapeshifters. "Busted. How did you know?" "Cody buys designer polo shirts for his uniform, not the cheap Old Navy stuff you prefer." Burn, right? She caught up to him and grabbed his arm, whispering hoarsely, "This is the stupidest thing you've ever done, Johnny. Shapeshifting at school into another human being? I don't remember any of our training mentioning that as a particularly good idea." Johnny glanced about. Seeing no one, he let his own human self come forward a bit. You look like a computer morphed composite of Johnny and Cody. Come all the way forward, please." "Could be useful," Johnny said aloud in a voice that also blended his and his rivals. "Dude, crazy." And so you kind of get a feel for the kind of character that Johnny is and why he's always getting in trouble. And he'll like get up to a demon trail. "Take it," Johnny replied with a yawn. "I'd rather stretch out in the back, catch some Z's." "If you fit, you mean, giant boy." She tried to hide her jealousy with these sorts of jabs, but it did irritate her that her twin now had about 10 centimeters on her. Because in the first book, you'll notice they're like the same height, but over the summer he's had a growth spurt, and so now he's like a lot taller than her. And there's constant jokes about it throughout the second book. "Bet I could shift myself some shorter legs if I tried," he thinks at her. "You could probably stretch your bones too, short round. I'll have you know that I'm the second tallest girl in 8th grade. Oh, wait a minute. That was a doofy reference to some old TV show or something, wasn't it?" Because he's always making jokes about like 70s and 80s cartoons and shows, and she doesn't get any of them. "Mom, Carol doesn't know anything about Indiana Jones," because he called her short round, right? Which is, anyway. If you don't know about this, then you're in the same boat as Carol. Starting the car with a wry grin, Veronica, their mother, shook her head. It's no fair if you're going to have telepathic conversations around me. I miss the jokes. Pero yeah, with the dad you've got, Carol, you should watch those films because their dad's also an anthropologist who goes around, like hunts for treasure, stuff like that. Once they were past the city limits, it was generally too dark to appreciate the countryside. But as Johnny slipped into a light sleep, Carol let her tonal edge slightly forward, just enough to benefit from the night vision of her wolf eyes. Even the impressive countryside couldn't erase her exhaustion, however, and Carol soon found herself in the midst of a strange dream. Her father was standing inside some stone chamber, carved with what seemed ancient Mesoamerican pictographs. At the center of the room, a dark pool of water began to bubble and overflow. Soon her father's shoes were covered, and the level kept rising. When it had reached his waist, Dr. Garza looked right at her, but his eyes were wrong. The hazel had gone all glittery green. It took her a second to understand. They were Tezcatlipoca's eyes, staring out at her from her father's face. He smiled a twisted smile and spoke in that cool sociopathic voice. Are you ready, child? It is now your turn. Let us see how far you could be bent, Carolina. The word echoed mockingly. Carolina, Carolina, Carolina. And then her mom goes, Carolina! And she wakes up like in the car. So Tezcatlipoca in the first book kind of like would get inside Johnny's dreams and taunt him, I've got your mom, but like in a crazy sociopathic dark god kind of way. And this time he's messing with Carol's mind. So there you get a bit of a flavor of the two characters and the kind of conversations that they have and their personalities, and they fit really, really well together. And where Carol's weak, Johnny's strong, and vice versa. And they're just a really, really great team. Every time in the books they get separated from each other, bad stuff happens, and when they're together, then they're usually able to solve the problems, which is part, I guess, of the message that I'm trying to give. So it's a little bit of taste about the books, and this would be a great time to field questions, either from any of you or from you or anybody else. Ask away. Even if they're like ridiculously silly questions, I am open to answering it. Yes, ma'am.
So, in the second book, will there be other more references to the Aztec folklore?
Yeah, sure. So that's a really good question. So in the first book, you know, I was writing about the Aztec underworld, so it was kind of already all done for me. I mean, I took some liberties because I merged Mayan traditions with Aztec traditions and played around with it a little bit. But even though the Aztecs and Mayans both had, we have references to their believing in like mermaids, merfolk. We don't have any of the stories that they told about them. We just have some like really basic things. The main idea is that according to Aztec belief, the world had been destroyed 4 times and rebuilt 5 times. So we were living in the 5th age of the world, the 5th sun, they called it. And the time right before our time was destroyed by a flood. And every time the world was destroyed, there were like human beings, I guess, or like sentient beings, conscious beings that were alive and that were destroyed with the whatever the destruction was, whether it was fire or wind or the flood or whatever it was. And each time, Quetzalcoatl, the god of creation, would save a small group of them by transforming them. So one time when the world was being destroyed by wind, he transformed some into monkeys so they could grab on the trees with their tails and hold tight. And when the world was destroyed by a flood, the ancient Aztec sources say, he turned some of the people into fish-like creatures so they could survive underwater. And so the idea is that some of them have survived into our time, and they're hidden away in these, kingdoms deep beneath the ocean.